On the morning of August 11th, 991 AD, a Saxon army led by the towering ealdorman of Wessex, the legendary Byrhtnoth, faced a Danish Viking host across a narrow tidal land bridge linking a small island to the English mainland. Determined to protect their homeland, the Saxons quickly formed a shield wall, intending to stop the marauding Vikings in their tracks and save Maldon. Two almost identically equipped armies clashed with a thunderous roar, shield wall against shield wall, in a contest of sheer courage, determination, stamina, and strength of will. What followed was merciless butchery, each warrior striving to strike down his enemy. The younger warriors, full of bravado and youthful energy, expended their efforts in desperate attempts to achieve a breakthrough, while the veterans to dispatch their foes as effortlessly and effectively as possible. Soon, the chaos of clashing swords and spears turned into a cacophony of screams and dying men. The sight was horrific. Lethal blows were mainly aimed at the openings of helmets, while massive damage was also inflicted by two-handed weapons, capable of crushing and disabling limbs and fighting hands. The carnage continued, with neither side giving an inch or flinching as the dead piled up between the fighting lines. Now imagine the fierce battles of Vikings on open seas and rugged landscapes. War Thunder captures that same intensity in a modern setting. This exhilarating, free-to-play military action game brings together ground vehicles, aircraft and naval vessels in intense battles across the globe. Available on PC, PlayStation, Xbox and Mac, it offers epic combat experiences on land, sea and air with stunning graphics, realistic physics and immersive sound effects. War Thunder features iconic and prototype military vehicles. Players can break through enemy lines in tanks, support from helicopters, or engage in dogfights. Each vehicle has unique features, and the game's customization options and damage model make every battle unique. The Seek and Destroy updates adds Benelux aviation, missiles with radar homing, community-driven improvements, and two new maps, the Mysterious Valley and Bering Sea. Download War Thunder for free. New and returning players who haven't played for 6 months or more get exclusive bonuses such as rentals for the M4 tank, unique skins, 3 premium vehicles and more. Hurry, the bonus season ends soon. Just a few years before the reign of King Edgar, the last Viking ruler of Danelaw, the Viking-ruled area of England, had been driven out, ushering in a period of relative peace and stability for the Anglo-Saxons. During Edgar's reign, Viking raids in England were thwarted, earning him the name Peaceful. This was due more to his effective leadership than his peaceful demeanor. As often happens in history, his premature death in his early 30s created a succession crisis that plunged England back into turmoil. He left behind 2 young sons, Edward and Ethelred, creating 2 potential lines of succession that inevitably clashed. As fate would have it, the realm was briefly ruled by the young and impulsive teenage Edward, whose violent outbursts alienated both the nobility and the commoners, eventually turning them against him. The general climate of distrust and disapproval culminated in Edward's murder at the age of 16, an act that some still attribute to the mother of his younger brother and successor, Ethelred, who ascended to the throne at the very young age of 12. It was obvious that the young king would serve as a figurehead, with others ruling in his stead until he came of age. Unfortunately for the young king, the general political situation wouldn't change, as his court was characterized by distrust, scheming, and disloyalty due to the brittle nature of the undermined royal authority. Many leading nobles and ealdormen in charge of the shires were now effectively in independent control of their areas. The prevailing atmosphere would earn Ethelred his notorious nickname, often mistranslated as the Unready, but more correctly interpreted as ill-advised or without counsel. At around the same period, throughout the 980s, Viking raiders returned with a vengeance. It began with a gradual build-up of small-scale raids along the southern east coasts of England, supposedly backed by the Normans who offered aid to the raiding Danes. Open hostilities almost broke out between the Normans and Ethelred, an outcome averted only by papal intervention. Whereas previous notable Saxon leaders had to defend small parts of the island like Wessex, Ethelred ruled a unified English kingdom that covered almost the entire area of modern England. He was heavily reliant on his ealdormen to guard and defend his extended coastline, but lacked the authority to effectively coordinate their efforts. In the summer of 991, the routine of usually small-scale invasions broke in a spectacular manner. A large fleet of 94 Viking longships appeared off the southern coast of England, storming and plundering Folkestone in Kent. Our sources only mention the Viking leader's name, Olaf. It's been assumed that he was none other than Olaf Tryggvason, the future king of Norway. The force of about 4,000 hardened Viking raiders posed a serious threat to Ethelred's mismanaged and unstable realm. From Folkestone, Olaf's force sailed north, aiming to attack and plunder the busy coastal town of Maldon. Entering the Blackwater estuary, the army, carried by a fleet of dragon-headed longships, set up camp on a small island known as Northy, connected to the mainland via a tidal causeway. It was a perfectly protected position for the Viking host, serving as a launching point for potential attacks and a good spoil depot. But the road to Maldon was not open. The hardy Viking invaders were amazed to see their path blocked by a large Saxon army, led by the legendary tall and imposing man Byrhtnoth, the alderman of Essex, accompanied by his household of elite warriors aiming to stop the incursions of the Northmen. A man in his 60s who commanded the respect of his subjects and comrades, Byrhtnoth had brought with him an army of almost 3,000 warriors, including his personal retinue and the local fyrd, which now stood as an immovable obstacle at the causeway. After a few hours of standstill, with neither side attempting any form of negotiations, a lone horseman rode through the morning mist. The wily Viking leader, accustomed to extorting his way out of battle, rode forward into no man's land, demanding payment in gold and armor. Byrhtnoth replied laconically that he would pay him, but with sword blades and spear tips. The battle was now inevitable, as the tide abated, revealing more of the land bridge that separated the two armies. The Saxon leader ordered a contingent of his most capable warriors forward, aiming to block the passage with their impenetrable shield wall. It wasn't long before the hair-raising war horn of the Norse signaled the attack. The air was soon filled with the battle cries of the charging Vikings, rushing through the causeway and clashing against the Saxon shield wall. The impetuous charge of the Vikings culminated in a ferocious clash between the two lines as the adrenaline-fueled combatants sought to terrify their enemies during their first contact. driven by a mix of anger, fear, and a desire to intimidate. With the fear factor of the initial contact gone, it was now a matter of mutual weighing of strengths and weaknesses, as each side strove to achieve a breakthrough. But the Saxons stood firm during the initial melee. No matter what the Vikings threw against Byrhtnoth's line, they were unable to penetrate the Saxon shield wall. As the dead piled up between the fighting lines, it became obvious to Olaf that his men could not sweep aside the robust Saxon formation. The order was given. The Viking warriors retreated back to their main force on Northey Island. A loud cheer was heard by the Saxon ranks as the Vikings cleared the causeway in front of them. The Vikings now found themselves in a solvable situation. It would have been easy to just embark on the longships and sail for greener pastures, but as fate would have it, this wasn't what happened. Olaf appealed to his enemy's sense of honor by requesting uncontested passage for his army. Let us cross the causeway so that we can fight like real men on equal ground. Amazingly, the Saxon leader accepted, forfeiting his tactical advantage. It is unclear why Byrhtnoth did that. He might have thought the Vikings were perfectly capable of raiding elsewhere, and that fighting here and now would have been a better and more effective way of containing them, given his success during the first skirmish. Or his sense of honor overwhelmed strategic priorities. Whatever the case, the Vikings were allowed onto the mainland. The two armies formed in a typical shield wall formation for the period. There would be no sophisticated tactics or complex maneuvering, only sheer, brutal hand-to-hand fighting. After a brief exchange of taunts and battle cries, the lines clashed in a ferocious melee. The line of interlocked shields left little choice on the individual warrior, who struggled not to be the weak link that could cause a rift in the tightly packed formation. Armed with swords, spears and knives, the frontline men aimed to dispatch their respective opponents by thrusting their weapons into unprotected parts of the head or disabling limbs. As the dead and wounded piled up, they created a sort of barrier between the two armies, compounding the difficulty and horror of traditional shield wall warfare. Byrhtnoth stood in the middle of the formation, his presence serving as a rallying point for his personal bodyguard and as a beacon of courage and hope for his army, as his unusually tall stature made him easily distinguishable. The Saxon army, composed of feared militia, stood the initial shock with valor, withstanding the Viking onslaught. The battle devolved into a chaotic mess of occasional exertions of aggressiveness, intertwined with conservative probing of formation weaknesses. In the midst of the most intense fighting, Byrhtnoth was struck, losing the use of his fighting hand. Soon after, the seriously wounded Saxon leader was cut down, his inspiring presence forever gone. It was the turning point of the battle. Breaches in the Saxon formation began to appear, exploited by the most aggressive Viking warriors who poured in, hacking and slashing. A small trickle of retreating Saxons turned into a flood, with the entire army melting away, leaving behind the most determined and disciplined, now isolated into ever-decreasing pockets of resistance that fought to their deaths. Olaf's army was triumphant, as the last obstacle blocking his way to Maldon was swept aside. Casualties are not known, but were probably significant for both sides. After the battle, the Vikings proceeded to threaten London itself, and were only averted by a huge payment made by the English king. This, of course, was only a temporary solution, as the infamous Danegeld would only exacerbate a problem that culminated in the eventual Danish conquest of the entire realm of the Anglo-Saxons just a couple of decades later.